have nothing to do with.
Oh, that's probably would have been. Yeah,
you know
I should have done that. I think we're live. Darn it. I should have done that. And I'm probably going to put that on after because there's a way. Hi, everybody. Welcome to our episode 3. There's a way for me to get a ongoing banner put at the bottom, but I haven't figured that part out yet, but it'll be good. Okay. So I'm really excited, you guys. My name is Rachael Pioltini. I'm a person in long-term recovery, and we're really excited to have our guest Carolyn here. She has a really great name like mine. So we got Pioltini and we got Alfieri. So we got 2 people here. So this should be oh, thanks, Michael. He's letting us know. So look, this is how this will work. It'll show us up on here every time someone comments, but I'm just kind of
one with an unpronounceable name. How do you pronounce your? Is it Thibault?
Theobald.
Theobald.
Theobald, I think. So I'm really excited about our guests that we have here. You guys have kind of seen, for those who follow us and follow our page, have seen Carolyn is 13 years in recovery, and she's done something that's actually really amazing, which a lot of us, a lot of people don't ever get to hit this milestone. So we're going to talk just briefly about how she turned 50 this year, which is exciting. And we have to talk about that because a lot of us don't, as you said, have said, a lot of us don't make it to 50.
No, we don't. That's why it was a milestone, not just because I'm 50, but I defied the odds. And I did something that people who knew me back then, when I was really deep into it, never thought that would ever happen. 25, probably. 30, absolutely not. So here I am 20 years later.
So awesome.
It's awesome, but I had a coworker once make this wonderful comment. She said, I didn't plan on living to 30. So adulting's really hard. And it truly is. Hi, Patricia.
Yeah.
I give shout outs because I'm like,
yeah, I know. Well, that's why I'm going to put them on here. So if some of your friends come on and they say something, I want to make sure that you see them too. But yeah, a lot of us don't. I mean, the sad thing, what I'm noticing right now, and it's like the most heartbreaking thing ever, is the common, I don't know how to say that the right way. The average person dying right now from overdose, and it's like this often, are people in their early ages. I mean, it's from 19 to 26 all the time. And for us to hit 30 is almost unheard of, and to hit 50 and then to do all these great things that you're going to share with us, as we get through this, to be able to do over the past, and to hit 13 years is huge. So
yeah, my sobriety date is Thursday, the 31st of January, 2008. So I'm approaching 13 years, and it's my bat mitzvah. So I'm having my bat mitzvah. I'm very excited about it.
Awesome. I love that.
Isn't it? And then on my 15th, we'll have a quinceañera.
That's that. You know what? Well, and you know what? It's a new, like I was just going to say, 13 years it's a whole new lifetime.
Oh, yeah.
Like 13 years, like each year, they're short, but they're not. 13 years, you've lived a whole separate life from what you were doing before.
Absolutely. And like before I delve into me, I usually share at the beginning of meetings something that you touched on, that this is going to be the only downer of the evening, because I use a lot of humor and levity in my tale, because it wasn't funny at the time, but I can look back on it and it was just like a comedy of errors. Yeah. I inherited from my mother a sense of humor about everything. So I can see the humor in everything, and I survived. But the one thing that I wanted to get out there, and I always say this at the beginning of all of my spiels, is that, in case you get bored and you just want to tune out or whatever, this is really important because it's what we just talked about. I've been working, with the exception of this past year, I've been working in adult residential treatment facilities. I've worked at some of the poshest places in Malibu with the marble floors and the 5-star chefs. I've toured and babysat Hall of Fame rock stars, Hollywood royalty, celebutantes, you name it, people with money. It's like almost $100,000 just to walk on the campus. And then I've worked at some really questionable state-run facilities. And like you said, the common thread is this: we have a progressive fatal disease that if left untreated, we die. And as of last Saturday, I buried 69 former clients. And out of those 69, only 7 of them, all but 7 of them, were under the age of 30.
Oh.
And out of all of that, only 3 of them died from non-drug related causes.
Yeah.
You know, it's the heroin overdoses or the body giving out or car crashes or what have you. People die. And then you go to meetings and you share about that, or you share about it at the treatment. Oh, I'm so sad that so-and-so died. Why are you so surprised? This is what happened.
Yeah.
And I had survivor's guilt for a long time. Like, you know, there are people who were just trying it the first time and they die. Me, I couldn't get enough. It was coming out my nose, and I'm still here.
Yeah, I have chills, literal chills.
Well, you know, I keep a ledger of every single person who's died. And I know it seems morbid, but I remember every name. I remember a little about everybody. And these are people that I spent 30, 60, 90 a month with, getting to know on a daily basis.
Yeah.
You know, and the really odd thing was, up until I moved to Utah, all that I lost were men, but the last 4 have been female. New moms that they just have to test the waters, and they don't make it.
Yeah, it's sad. It's heartbreaking. And I mean, now we know, and the statistics are kind of flying around right now, but I don't think that we really know what the true numbers are. But adding COVID onto the mix, I mean, I think everybody experienced their group of friends, and we can chat about that just for a second, like what it was like, you know, where you're from. Because for me, out here in Utah, and we have a lot of we've got a good recovery community here. And the second March came and things shut down and COVID got, you know, real, people and their anxiety went really high. I mean, it was like just like that. All these people were relapsing. And sadly, I mean, there's been, you know, in our community, there's been some deaths. We've got a lot of suicide. We've got total depression happening. But the anxiety and the panic and fear it's putting people back. So
absolutely.
What's it been like out where you're at? I imagine it's the same everywhere.
Well, it's same everywhere. And, you know, I don't know if you know this, but COVID touched me personally. My brother developed COVID pneumonia at the end of June, and he was on life support for a month.
Oh, wow.
Or so. And, you know, he'll never be the same. And in fact, he's convalescing with our sister who lives in Salt Lake City.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's horrible. And to add to it that the holidays are coming.
Yeah. Seasonal blues are already about to come.
Absolutely. Historically, this time of the year is not good for me.
Yeah.
You know, but where we are, you know, it's really funny that I think a lot of us, and I've seen us joke about this, that I have no problem isolating. Right.
Yeah.
Right. You know,
right.
And a federal mandate where I have to stay inside and not see anybody. I'm good with that. You know, I only left to, you know, go see the dope man or make a phone call, or, you know what I mean? So I have no problem with this. But where we are, you know, I couldn't have asked for a better location, because as much as I miss Salt Lake and as much as I live LA, we're safe here. It's not as populous, but it's happening. It's around us. It's in the neighborhood.
Yeah, it's scary. It's scary. My family, and then we'll talk recovery, was about to move back to New York, and they were moving. This house was up for sale, the whole thing, and COVID hit. And now my parents are like, we were going back home, and they're like, why would we go to New York? I mean, we just watch what happens in a big city when something crazy happens. And they were like, yep, nope, we're staying in Utah, far away from the people. And it's scary out there. So
yeah, I can imagine. Where in New York are you from?
From Queens.
Oh, okay.
So my family
in the city.
Yeah, we're city, first generation Queens. My other parts of my family were from Brooklyn, and my mother's from Denmark, but my whole family line we're all New Yorkers. It's a good,
nothing wrong with that.
yeah, it's beautiful. So let's get into your story, and like, we can just start off with, I know you don't like to, and I love this about you, how you like to share your story. Some people love to do war stories, and I just don't, we don't need to go there. And I love that you want to share your real experience. So we can kind of dive in, and you can tell us a little bit about you and who you are and how you came to be you.
Okay.
Yeah.
How I came to be me. No, that's just it. I find that when it's mostly in younger meetings that people like to sit and glorify. And look, I can glorify with the best of them. I've got stories that would put Pablo Escobar to shame. You know what I mean? but the further away that you get from it, you're not living that life anymore, and it's a wonderful, wonderful thing.
Yeah.
But so I just qualify. And for those who don't know what qualifying means, it's a program talk for just proving to you that I earned my seat in AA and that I know what I'm talking about. So, but please jump in if you have any questions or anything. I see Ashley's message up there. Hi, Ashley. Yeah. I didn't know I left such an indelible mark on you. I was really shocked.
She loves you.
Oh.
I hear a lot of people do, so I'm excited to hear your journey.
Well, it's all a ruse, and the checks will be in the mail. No. So me, my favorite subject, that's another thing too, is that I don't get nervous before speaking, because an audience where I get to talk about me, I mean, how wonderful is that, right?
Yeah.
But it was obvious and evident way before any of the substances came into play that there was something different about me, something that I couldn't put my finger on. And it wasn't the kind of different that Olivia Newton-John made me realize I was different, later on in life. It wasn't that kind of different. But it's just there, growing up when I was a kid, like in kindergarten, first grade, I never felt happy, carefree. When all the other kids were playing, I would just sit by myself. It was like I was in some sort of aquarium for misery. Or the way I would watch TV, like I would just be up against the screen, just fantasizing that I was in there and not here. And I didn't have the words for it, but it was there, and it was very, very prevalent. I am the youngest child of Carol and Charles Alfieri. They were high school sweethearts, and my mother knew what she was getting into. She knew what she was marrying. They married, I think it was the end of her senior year of high school. And towards the end of that, they asked her to leave because she was pregnant with my brother. This was 1960, so that was a big thing. But Mom knew what she was getting into. When I found, they had a chest of drawers that they got when they were married, and I was playing in it, and I found a 3-ring binder that had a big heart on the cover that said Charlie plus Carol plus Rheingold beer. So, there was the third party that was entering into the marriage. But so I described my father as your garden variety drunk, just your bar stool beer. Beer was his thing. He could down 12 packs, and that was his go-to thing. So I've got a garden variety drunk for a father, and then I have my mother, who was my absolute hero, but I describe her as a bipolar manic depressive pill-popping rageaholic. Oh. So I'm the product of that. So what does that make me, right? And growing up around the alcohol, and I have an older brother and an older sister that are considerably older than I am, so much so that I was essentially raised as an only child.
Oh, wow.
The existence was such. And, it's only with sober eyes that I can look back on my childhood and say, it wasn't that bad. When I came into the program, I was filled with so much rage and so much resentment and anger, and that was mine. And I was going to hold on to it because that's what made me me, But one of the things that I learned, and I have to give a shout out if I could, to
Sure.
Chateau Recovery, where the last place I worked, it's in Midway, Utah.
I love Chateau.
Oh, you know it.
Mhm.
They do things a little bit differently. They don't just hand you a blue book and say, good luck to you. It's not like that at all. But one of the therapists on a monthly basis would run a workshop based on the book, Knight in Rusty Armor. And in a nutshell, basically what it is just stripping down all the armor that's built you up and made you rigid. We had one therapist her favorite saying was, you're just choosing to stay rigid. When people say, well, that's just the way I am, and I'm going to be angry and this, that, and the other thing, and you're choosing to be rigid. So I have that in the back of my head all the time, that, Carolyn, you're being an asshole. And that saying, if you meet 3 or 4 assholes in a day, chances are you're probably the asshole.
Yeah.
So, that's me. But we had these wonderful workshops, Knight in Rusty Armor, and it's based on the book. And Virginia Satir was the psychiatrist who came up with the whole premise of it. But essentially, when we're very young, usually between the ages of birth until we're really cognizant and we can remember, we're being fed information. And there's always a time in our lives where it turns, where things turn and you lose your innocence, And I was born into a family that was rife with dysfunction. There was no happiness in that house whatsoever. I would say, hey, Sammy.
She's great. She's from England.
Well, I think I knew that. Yeah. But, one of the first substance I was addicted to was nicotine, because when I was born, back then they didn't know as much as they know now that smoking or drinking or what have you affects the baby. So, they should have just slapped a nicotine patch on me, and that would have been, I would have been good to go. But I was born into a house that was just rife with just fighting and infighting and hate. And, mom got married like she did back in those days to get her MRS degree. And, dad was the head of the house. And I was just absolutely miserable. But looking back again with sober eyes, and this is a wonderful thing, the lies that propel us into our addiction that we carry with us. And this is really, really important, because when those tapes start going, we all have those negative tapes. We're not good enough. We're not this, that, or the other thing. They play. And so the workshop is basically about ripping it all apart. And the pendulum theory, you're going to have a lot of sorrow, but yes, you're also going to have a lot of joy. But I think we're just predisposed to focus on the negative a lot.
Yeah.
But one of the main thing that I was fed from the time I could remember up until I was in my 30s by my father was that he would get drunk and he would single out people. And he used to tell me constantly that he was drunk the night he fucked my mother and I should have never been born.
Oh.
So I'm the world's biggest mistake. I'm an accident. I wasn't supposed to be here. I'm shit, and I'm this, that, and the other thing. And with all this other stuff that was going on in the family dynamic, I just added to it. So again, you see, there was something unspoken in the house that I couldn't put my finger on. We never ate dinner together. When I would go spend the night at friends' homes and we'd eat together at the table, that was so foreign for me. The normalcy, the love, there was no love lost between my parents.
Yeah.
And so, being from New York, because I was born in a little hamlet of Rockland County, which is not Long Island. Everybody thinks it's on Long Island.
Yeah.
But my parents, I guess, being the good addict alcoholics that they were, didn't understand what they were doing. But see, New York was the problem. And so they picked us up and moved us 3,000 miles away to Phoenix, Arizona.
Oh, wow.
So I guess they never heard that saying, wherever you go, there you are, because nothing changes if nothing changes, right? And the same old shit started happening. My brother joined the Navy, so he was gone. My sister was doing her thing. Excuse me. She was doing her thing. And here was little Carolyn. that was still just trying to cope. And the only way that I could cope was to fantasize. And I had quite the imagination. And it always surprises me when I hear about our coping skills. And, I have to back up just a second. I was talking about this the other day with somebody else, that I think people like us, addicts and alcoholics, were born with this innate ability to lie and manipulate and con. Because when I was 6 years old, I remember I was at a toy store with my grandfather, and there was something that I wanted. And he said something to me that I hardly ever heard, and that was no. So I don't know where this came from. I don't know. I wasn't taught it. I said, well, I need that for a birthday party that I'm going to. Oh, he said, well, in that case, so he bought the toy, and we come home. Now, when you're 6 years old, you don't understand the ramifications of lying.
Yeah.
So he outed me. You like put me on blast in front of the whole family, and I learned very quickly not to do that ever again. But whatever. But the childhood itself wasn't that bad. And one of the greatest gifts I got in recovery, there's a million of them, but I would have to say, bar none. And when you asked the question the other day, what's the greatest strength that you've learned? It's forgiveness. Yeah. I've learned forgiveness, and that is so important, because I hear people sitting in meetings and, fuck my father and fuck this, and they're the reason I'm like this, and they're the reason I'm like that.
Just angry.
It's angry, just angry. Yeah. And that's what keeps us sick.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
And I must have been about 2 or 3 years sober, and I was in a meeting, and I heard this woman say something that, how every now and then you hear something that just blows you away.
Yeah.
And it's so simple, but you're like, I have never thought of it like that before. She was talking about how this, that, and whatever happened in her family. And then she said, you know what, though? And here it is. And I know if you were clients of mine, you know what I'm about to say. Because they all wrote it down in their little journals. Hurt people. Yeah. Damaged people. It was as simple as that.
Yeah.
That blew me away. It's time to break the cycle, right?
Yeah. So
that it made it easier for me to forgive. Here I am just trying to cope and survive, right? And I have to go around and asking forgiveness from people, but I'm not willing to forgive.
Yeah.
Who the hell do I think I am? Right? It's like I said earlier, I might not think much of myself, but I am all I ever think about.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hi, Bobby. So that made it very easier for me. And the weird fact of the matter is my father and I had very similar lives growing up. My grandmother died of multiple sclerosis when he was 16. And he drank to cope. But moving along in my story, because we want to get to the good parts.
Yeah.
I graduated high school by the skin of my teeth. There was never any push to succeed or go to college. If we had a motto for the Alfieris, it would have been half-assed is good enough. A C is all right. D was okay. There just wasn't any strive for perfection. So I just thought, all right, we'll just kind of eke by, and whatever it is, But I made it through my teenage years. My early teenage years, because I had this, I don't want to say it was a healthy fear of alcohol and what it could do. There was an absolute repulsion to what I saw it do to my father. I'm sure a lot of people can relate to, having friends come over, and then there's your parent like passed out in the chair, and you're like, hurry, like let's get to my room before it wakes up. It's embarrassing. So I said that was never going to be like me. Turns out my sister had quite the crystal meth addiction. I didn't know that. When I was growing up, she was sent away to go live with the nuns. So I didn't know what was happening. I just knew that she was gone. My brother developed a drinking habit while he was in the Navy. My mother was a pill popper, and my father was a drunk, and I swore that was not going to be me. See, I was going to make something of my life. something big, and talk about delusions of grandeur. My fantasy was when I was growing up, I wanted to be an actress, right? Who doesn't? And of course, our acting and the ability to cry on cue would come into play later.
Right.
And see. But here's little Carolyn, right? Thinking in her little suburb of North Phoenix on a cul-de-sac in Scottsdale, Arizona, that one day some great Hollywood casting director was going to drive down our cul-de-sac and discover me. Like it wasn't going to happen.
Those are real kids.
It could happen. I mean, Justin Bieber was discovered on YouTube, right?
Yeah.
But whatever. So my junior year of high school, I had made it through without touching any drugs, because with my sister and she was the black sheep of the family. I heard constantly from my mother. That don't end up like your sister. Please don't end up like your sister. It would break my absolute heart if you did that. I'm sorry, I have to turn off my phone.
Oh, I should turn mine off because it usually rings quite a few times. Oh, I did already.
Yeah, I get notifications and all that. But anyway, so I had it programmed into me to not turn out like my sister. And so junior year of high school, that summer, the summer of 1986, my mother hadn't been feeling well, puny, as she called it. And she went to the doctor. They didn't have what they have now. And I guess CAT scans were relatively new back then. I'm sure if she had been diagnosed now, she'd probably still be alive. But they found a mass. They weren't sure what it was. And so on October 7th, see, remember I told you that I'm really good with dates and I have my memory.
Yeah.
Oh, Bob, you're too kind. Because I never smoked weed. And that's the God's honest truth. There's two things that people can't understand about me. And one is that I've never smoked a cigarette in my entire life.
Oh, wow.
I never have. I did dope enough to put all of us, to shame. But I never smoked a cigarette because they're bad, Rachel. They'll kill you.
That's right? Hilarious.
And I never smoked weed. And I got my first tattoo when I was 40.
Oh, wow.
And I'm glad I waited. I didn't want to have some sort of messed up Gumby or something, but so everything is recovery related and they're all really important things. They're near and dear to me.
Good.
But I digress. Anyway, so my mother, they know now that when you do exploratory surgery, when they cut you open and air hits cancer, it spreads. And so they sewed her up and sent her home and gave her 3 to 6 months to live. 365 days of the year, and she died on Christmas Day, December 25th of 1986. It put a damper on the holiday.
Yeah, sure.
And I think that there's an awesome book that everyone keeps telling me, you got to read. It's called The Body Keeps the Score. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you heard about it, but there are muscle memories that are just ingrained to us. And I do think there's something about seasonal affect disorder. And I'm fortunate that we live in a climate where it's really not that hot. Not that cold, but it gets blazing hot. It's like hell. Yeah. But anyway, so my mother died. Okay, so I still had my senior year of high school to get through. My father and I were the only two really in the house at this time. And it was just constant fighting. And what are you going to do with your life? You got to make something. You got to learn a trade. That was his thing. You got to learn a trade, right? And I didn't learn a trade. I had no ambitions other than becoming Meryl Streep, and that obviously wasn't going to happen. But I did find that a great distraction for me was relationships. And so I got involved with somebody who lived in Los Angeles, and it was just so serendipitous that Phoenix was becoming the problem. Why don't I just boogie on over to LA? Okay. So I moved on over to LA a year after I graduated high school. And I got involved with somebody who actually would come back into my life a little bit later and would kind of play a part in who I am now. And not so much in a good way. Mm-hmm. But everybody serves a purpose. There's no accidents. I don't believe there's bad relationships. There's bad situations, and you learn from it. Yeah. So I moved to LA, and I just sort of bummed along. I worked in video stores. I just stringing my life together. It was the late 80s, the early 90s. And I turned 21 on March 2nd, 1991. And that's when I could start hitting the bars, because, when I share and I tell people that, if you're trying to do this, and that's something that I wanted to point out about the 68 or 69 people who died. If you're doing this, or it is your first time sober, or you feel like you keep slipping up and you just can't seem to get it, just remember that it takes a minute, and you have something that 69 people no longer have. You have another choice. You have another chance, right? Yeah. So I didn't breathe the sober breath for about 22, 23 years. And I truly mean that, because if I wasn't addicted to something, cold medicine, NyQuil, I learned very early that Sudafed worked,
Yeah.
But now, people, places, and things. I was very addicted to everything. But I turned 21, and it was that night that I learned that I had the constitution of a truck driver. I found that I had a fondness for schnapps, butterscotch in particular, and I can down entire bottles and I was much thinner, much smaller. I'm only 5'3", and I'm not going to tell you how much I weigh. Just you'll see me from this up, and that's all that's important.
That's just
I put the needle down and picked up the fork, because
we all did.
Yeah, exactly. But I discovered that I hated the taste of alcohol, but I liked the way it made me feel. And I never was a blackout. I never had hangovers. I'm an anomaly. But I remember thinking, if they could just put this feeling in a pill, man, would take millions, Yeah. And I'd had my wisdom teeth pulled. I'd been on like Tylenol 3s or whatever, and they made me nauseous. I didn't like it.
Yeah.
Okay? So moving along quickly, I popped around in LA, and then went through a series of relationships, and my MO was serial monogamy, and always have a couple people on the back burner, because once you get sick of me, because everybody gets sick of me because I'm too intense, I'm high drama. That's something I inherited from my mother. I have her voice, I have her looks, I have her need for high drama, and her love for prescription medication. That's what I have for my mother. I would always have to have a couple on the background, just to keep burning. And also, it felt good to be wanted. Everybody wants to be wanted, right? So the riots broke out in LA, and I had my beloved grandfather would beg me to please. What are you doing in LA? You gotta come home. You gotta come home.
Yeah.
So wouldn't you know it, that I had somebody back home in Phoenix that I could go home to, because I had an ongoing relationship with somebody who I didn't know at the time, but it turns out that she was a tweaker, big time. I just knew that she had. I can hear myself. Am I coming through okay?
You're coming through great.
Okay, great. Okay. She would have these moments of rage, and on one particular evening, she got angry and threw a frying pan at me. So I was covered with burns, and that was the first time I'd experienced physical abuse at the hands of somebody else, And so I moved in with my brother for a very short period of time. And while this was happening, drinking was something that I could take or leave. It was really no big deal. But if you put it in front of me, you better believe it, I'm going to drink the whole thing.
Yeah.
I believe, I don't know if anybody that was there is watching. I hope not, because that wasn't my finest hour. But I think it was New Year's Eve of 95 into 96 at a work party. They told me I drank a whole bottle of butterscotch schnapps, half a bottle of tequila, I'm not done. Two Amstel Lights, and 3 shots of Goldschlager.
That's a party.
Yeah. For me.
Yeah.
And I didn't black out, but I remember the next day I had bruises all over me, and I don't remember what happened, but I was in a blackout drunk.
Yeah.
So I'm living with my brother, and every now and then I'd go out and I'd party. And what's going to fix me? Another relationship. So I got involved with somebody else, and this is where things get going. Okay? I started dating this woman. It was around the 4th of July of 1996. I think the dates are kind of hazy because there were too many people in between.
Yeah.
And I had a headache. We were at the movies, and this one particular evening, I mentioned that my head hurt, and she said, "Oh, I've got just the thing for you." So she goes into her medicine cabinet and she gives me a Percocet. And I remember it scared me at first because I couldn't feel myself breathing, and that's how we die. We stop breathing. We can't feel it. You're talking to the queen of overdose, but I kind of liked that feeling. And when I was 8 years old, my mother sort of foisted the violin on me to play the violin. So not only was I a band geek, I was an orchestra geek. So they really made fun of me, But in playing for as long as I did, I developed aches and pains in my body. And I just made mention to the person that I was seeing. And she's like, "Oh, you know what? We're going to make an appointment for you to go see my doctor. She will hook you up." Those were her exact words. And sure enough, I went to see this Dr. Feelgood, who is still practicing in the Phoenix area. And I think because of me, I think she was brought in and investigated, but she's still doing her thing. I explained my situation and what was going on. And she's like, "Okay, wonderful, write you for this." So they sent me home with, I believe it was extra strength Vicodin. Okay. Now, I started learning early on, because, when something strange happens, when we start getting medication like that, where we look at the bottle and where it says take 1 to 2 every 4 to 6 hours, we read take 4 to 6 every 1 to 2
hours.
Right?
Yeah.
And it's so funny because I was talking with my best friend from high school last night, and she was talking about how "Oh yeah, I still have some Percocet from a surgery from a couple years ago." I'm like, how does that happen? Opiates do not live long.
Not with me, and I don't even like them, and I'll still read the bottle.
Oh, absolutely. I was a trash can. But anyway, so I learned that if you mix them with alcohol, they work faster, right? So here I am. I would have to say probably my mid-20s was my period of, I'm thinking I got it. I'm making it. I had a pretty good job. I was working at the Phoenix Art Museum. I was down to just seeing 2 people at this time. So I thought I had my shit together pretty good, right? And with the medication, I started noticing that every time I would run out, I would get sick. I didn't know it at the time, but I was dope sick. I didn't realize that when you take the 30 or 60 that they give you in 3 days, when they're supposed to last for 30, that you get very, very sick. And so it was the perfect storm of all the lies about myself that I believed and my predisposition, because I do believe that addiction is a disease, and I think it's a family disease. And I think that I've seen it take out whole families. Working in treatment, I've taken care of whole families before, and it's always painkillers, heroin. It's horrible. But I started making these excuses to go in earlier and earlier. And, I hear this is where the acting comes into play, where I would feign back problems so they could give me something different, because, it's a very fast moving disease. You could be put on the Tylenol 3s, the Tylenol 4s, the Vicodins, the extra strength Vicodin, the Percocet, the extra strength Percocet. And then it happened. It was December 15th of 2000. And you always remember the day you fall in love, right?
Yeah.
That day, the day that will live in infamy. The doctor's going through my chart, and she's looking, and she's like, "You're taking way too many pills, and it's not good for your liver." And I'm, oh my God, she's going to take away my pills. What am I going to do?
Oh, gee, you must have went nuts.
Oh, yeah, like, well, I'll just have to find somebody else, whatever. But she said, you know what? There's a new medication that's out on the market that you would be perfect for. You only have to take it once a day. It's got a protective outer coating, so it'll last you. And they give it to people like it was called OxyContin. That's what it was. That's what it was. And I knew nothing about it. I didn't know that it was nicknamed hillbilly heroin, or essentially it was just a bag of dope in a pill, because that's what it is, right?
Yes.
And I went home and I took it and I didn't like it. And that's because I was taking it the way you were supposed to. When you swallow it. I'm like, this isn't doing anything for me. But fortunately for me, on the cover of Time and Newsweek, that very week was a full page front editorial story about how OxyContin was the new menace to America. And it was called heroin. And it gave step-by-step details on how to break it up. And it packed a punch as strong, if not stronger, than pure grade pharmaceutical heroin. Now, I was of the school of thought, and I hear it from a lot of people, that, if it comes from a doctor, it's got to be okay, right? So I went into the bathroom and I took one of the pills and I crushed it up and I did my thing. And about 10 minutes later, I found the thing that made all the voices in my head stop. It made me feel like I was beautiful. It made me feel like I was loved. It made me feel invincible. And I wanted more of it. One is too many and 1,000's never enough. And eventually the person that I was living with at the time, see, it wasn't a relationship. We were running partners. And that's why, if we have the time, I want to talk about a little bit about that too, about relationships in recovery. But we were running partners. So we would share each other's pills. So she was still getting them, you see. But living in Phoenix, Arizona, put us in close proximity to Nogales, Mexico.
Oh, wow.
And I heard in Nogales they had anything you could possibly want. And sure enough, I'm not glorifying. I'm just saying that, waxing nostalgic, back in the day, you can get a bottle of OxyContin 20s for like $15, and you do what you have to do, put them in a pill bottle, stick them up inside of you, and then walk through customs. Never had a problem. So eventually the doctor caught wind of what we were doing, because my addiction, it's funny. It likes to tell me things. It likes to tell me to do things that I would never in a million years ever thought that I would do. When it tells you to hawk your mother's wedding ring, or sell, your prized violins, or, when you've got
take your kid's piggy bank.
Exactly. Like, let's see, do I eat or do I use? Because I'm sick all the time, right? The doctor got wind to what I was doing, and that was forging prescriptions with her name.
Oh.
And I littered the Phoenix area with this, and so we were cut off, and I stopped doing that for a while. And I'm like, oh my God, what are we going to do? What are we going to do to make the sickness go away? While we were in Mexico, because we were driving down to Mexico 3 or 4 times a week. And you've got a bad problem when the Mexican cartels won't sell to you. Senora, no, you're going to die. You're going to die.
Yeah.
But he says, we don't have any more oxy, but I've got this. And it was black tar heroin. So yeah, for those of you who are watching and didn't know that, good old Carolyn was a smack addict for a while. so and it's funny because we tell these lies to ourselves. Like at first it's when you're drinking, and I see this in the rooms too. It's like one is better than the other. Like when you're drinking, at least I'm not putting anything up my nose. And then when I'm doing that, well, at least I'm not using a needle. And then, we are the only people who can judge and 12-step somebody while we're laying in the gutter with a needle in our arm. We're just really, really judgmental.
Yeah.
So I I started my, I believe at that particular time, it was a 4-year, $1,500 a week heroin habit. Who's that in the background?
My little girl. We have this thing in our house, like we're all like super ADD, so we pace the house when we start getting antsy. So she's just pacing the house, listening to her music, drinking a soda.
Oh, I would do the same thing too when I'm on the phone. That's why I have to use my hands.
Yeah.
Whatever. So at any rate, so I had a $1,500 a week heroin habit. And what do you do to pay for things when you're not working? Because I sure as hell wasn't employable. Never left the house. You do what you have to do. You do what you have to do. Let's just say there isn't anything that you can imagine that I have not done to feed my addiction. And the thing is that I was raised better than that. I may not have had the perfect mother and father or the perfect upbringing or whatever, but with the forgiveness that I have for them now, they were just flawed people that gave me doing the best that they could, right? But, I blamed my father for this. This is your doing. I'm a piece of shit and I've got the track marks to prove it, right? So the heroin thing sort of got a little precarious. So I went back into the business of littering the Phoenix Metro, northern Phoenix area with bogus prescriptions. And I don't want to brag or anything or glorify, but in the summer of 2005, I was arrested 9 times for prescription forgery.
Oh my goodness.
In a 2-month span. And
you're lucky you're employable now.
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. And it's amazing that I'm not still sitting in a jail cell.
Yeah.
Because every time I would get arrested, I would go to my court and I'm like, all right, maybe this will be it. Maybe this will be, because while all this is happening, I saw no alternative. And just to bring it home as to how sick I really was, what I'm going to tell you here in a second, every time I would get arrested, it would be quashed. And I'm like, what does that mean? Because I had never run afoul of the law. I had parking tickets or speeding tickets, but, I didn't understand, Carolyn, you're looking at big time. These are federal things, right? But it was like the universe was going, don't do it again. Don't do it again. Don't do it again. But, I'm different. I'm unique, right?
Right.
And so my second to the last time I was arrested, and hopefully it'll be the last time I was arrested, I'm at the same courthouse. The same bailiff sees me, in the morning when you go in and you're on the docket. And she's like, it's quashed. And she's like, honey, can I give you a little bit of advice? One of these days, you keep doing what you're doing, and the judge is going to want to take a look at this person who keeps showing up on the docket, right? Oh, yeah, whatever. Not me.
Yeah.
Thursday, September 22nd, 2005, was the last time that I was arrested. And I did the walk of shame at the Walmart on 59th Avenue in Bell in Arizona. I had dropped off a prescription. I was so sick. And normally I would do the smart thing that we do where you drive around to see if there's any police. You know what I mean? You just give it some time, And so I'm like, whatever's going to happen is going to happen. Let's do it. Just like in Flow, remember, let's do it.
Yeah.
So I approached the what do you call it, the counter, and I noticed that everybody behind the counter looked different.
Yeah. Oh, geez, it was a total sting.
It was a total sting. Yeah, everybody looked completely different. And so I'm like, oh, fuck me. And then out of the door they came, the boys in blue and Officer Maria Tellers of the Phoenix Department of the DEA.
And my goodness.
That's why I say, my intervention.
Yeah.
And despite this, I still had a little bit more to do, but it happened very, very quickly. And then I got sober. So here I am, Miss Alfieri, we've been looking for you for a very long time. And they had packets of all the times that I had forged this, forged that, did this, did that. And they're like, oh, you're looking at a really long time. You're looking at 36 years for all of this. And I'm like, and that's not even counting the time, by the grace of I don't know what, coming out of Nogales, Mexico with like, I think I had $13,000 worth of heroin shoved up inside of me.
Oh,
And I'm stopped by, you know how outside of the border, they do a search of your car, like with the dog.
yeah.
And I don't know what was looking out for me. And I'll touch on the God thing in a second, because I'm like, God only existed for situations like this, right?
Yeah.
Right? Please don't let it happen. They got called away and I didn't get arrested. And I know had that happened, I would not be sitting here right now. I would be sitting in a Mexican prison or who knows what.
Yeah.
So at any rate, so I get arrested. I'm just so sick. And like, here it is. This is how it ends. This is how it ends. And, you know, we all talk about a moment of clarity. We all have our moments of clarity. And all throughout, because normally they happen a little bit later before the end, but I'd find that all throughout my using, I was having these, what are you doing? What are you doing? And this one particular time, not too long before I got arrested, I was hospital surfing, you know, ER surfing to get medications. And it's funny because now I talk to people in hospitals and I say, if you think you're being scammed, you are.
You are.
Take it from me. And I was laying on the gurney and I'm like, I have to cry. You know, this is where the ability to cry comes up.
On point.
You know? Yeah, exactly. Meryl Streep ain't got nothing on me. And the tears wouldn't come. I couldn't cry. I was thinking my mother dying, nothing would come until I thought, I took a look around. I'm like, this is what I'm doing on a Friday night. This is my life. My life means I'm just a name on a docket. I would get bills because, you spend money or steal. If you were stupid enough to let me in your house and I stole from you, and there isn't anybody I didn't steal from, I'm sorry. But, I would get bills in the mail and then just rip them up and throw them away, thinking that that's going to make it, go away. Go away, right? So I'm thinking about this and like, oh, how proud my mother would be. And the tears came.
Yeah.
And to make matters even worse, they gave me Darvocet, which was it was horrible. It was a tragedy all the way around. So I'm arrested. I'm sitting in the back of the patrol car and I'm taken to the Glendale Police Department. And this is drug addiction, folks. This is really the disease of addiction, the dis-ease of addiction.
Yeah.
If you've ever been arrested, and I'm sure most of you watching have been arrested, they shackle you. They have you in a situation where you're like this and you're chained at the feet. And some stations, the Glendale police station had this, where they lock you in it looks like a locker, and on the other side, they're taking your information. Okay. Yeah. And the DEA agent was grilling me left, right, and sideways. And I'm being flippant because, again, I think I'm Griselda Blanca, I'm Pablo Escobar, you ain't going to get nothing from me, that sort of thing. And the woman, she was getting so frustrated with me and she just put her pen down and she's like, you know what, Carolyn? I deal with bad people all day, every day. I don't think you're bad. I just think you're sick and you need help. And that was huge for me. Because even though my retort to her, as I'm chained and shitting myself and I'm dope sick and I'm cramping, was to look this woman right in her eyes and say, I don't have a problem. I can stop whenever I want to. I say as I'm shackled and whatnot. So if you think I'm going to sit here and you're like me and you think you're going to get off easy every time you get arrested and quashed, and because old Carolyn said, no, because we're going to jail. So I ended up, I did a little, it doesn't matter. But anyway, so I got out and I had nowhere to go. And at this time, my running partner had gotten involved with somebody else. So I broke into what I thought was rightfully my house. And I had to leave. And so I started looking at the classifieds and I found another hostage, who I'm making a living amends. Let's just put it that way. It was just a place to sleep. and I would take them into my madness and my drama and this, that, and the other thing. And, you know, I mean, my amends list is just long, long, long. And, you know, my thing was, you know, I'm just going to stay away from the needles and the heroin. And I've had moments of abstinence. I don't want to say I was sober, because sober is a way of life. Sober is a way of thinking. And I knew no other way but to cause chaos and disorder. And if I was in your life, I was the one that made your life worse. You know, people would look at me and go, oh God, you know, here she comes, hide your things. Or, you know, they'd pick up the phone. No, I don't have any money. You know how that goes. So I got involved with somebody, and I overstayed my welcome. But wouldn't you know it, I reconnected with the person that I had originally moved to LA for. And she was on Long Island, New York. And she said, why don't you come back? Because I told her that I had a problem and it was in the past. So she thought that I was cured. Okay. So I moved away from Phoenix because Phoenix was no longer, it wasn't safe anymore. And I moved to Long Island. And I was doing okay there for a little bit. You know, I was living with someone who was incredibly emotionally and verbally abusive, and would reignite those tapes that I was a piece of shit, that I was nothing, was holding on to the past. Her mother had died of alcoholism, so she thought drug addicts and alcoholics were the shit of the earth. And well, if I ever find out that you're using in my house, I'm going to throw you out, and this, that, and the other thing. I started hospital surfing again and doctor shopping. And I didn't know it. And I like to think that I had something to do with the laws changing. But every time you go to the doctor, they started this new thing called prescription drug monitoring. And I didn't know what that was, but every time I would go to the doctor, I would get shut down because they would tell me, I just got this in the mail, and it looks like you've been to 15 different doctors in 15 different days, getting 15 different whatever. So it was like every other to score was closing on me. And so she said, you know what? I have a friend of mine who has a chiropractic office. In her office, there's an addiction therapist. So we're going to get you an appointment with the therapist. We're going to fix this. Everything's going to be okay. Meanwhile, she had no idea that this was going on and that I was still stealing her pain meds and doing, you know, the disease was still coming to a head. It was coming to a head. And I do remember thinking at this time, you know, I don't have another cold turkey kick in me. I can't do it. I'm going to die. I'm getting old. Because this is the thing, you know, I've been using in some form or another since I was 17 years old. We're now, what I'm about to tell you is the end of January of 2008. And I was just months away from my 38th birthday. So I always tell my beautiful 20-somethings when I spoke at House of Hope or Odyssey, you remember me saying this, there ain't nothing sexy about a 40-year-old junkie.
No.
Absolutely not. So anyway, I had remembered hearing about this medication called Suboxone that was supposed to make it a softer transition. And, you know, and I'm like, oh my God, I got to get on that. But every doctor that I called would say, well, it's $300. I'm like, honey, if I had $300, you know where I'd be.
Yeah.
Right? So I remember it was Wednesday, January 30th. I was tearing the house apart. I was desperate. It was like I was finally down on my knees with my fingers, you know, like, I want you to interlace your fingers and walk backwards to the sound of my voice.
Yeah.
And everything was just starting to align perfectly. I waited for that abusive relationship. I don't want to say her name, but anyway, she taught school, so she was gone early. And as soon as she got in the car, I started making phone calls. And the appointment for the addiction therapist was for later in that day, on Thursday, the 31st of January. And that particular morning, I had remembered a doctor that I had shopped a long time ago. And he was on the list of Suboxone doctors. And I called and I picked up the phone and I'm crying. I'm like, and I'm going to die in heroin and needles and I don't want to do this. And I'm almost 40, you know. He's like, well, I usually charge $300. I know you have three. I don't have three. I don't have the money. I'm killing myself, literally. Didn't admit. But I'm dying because I was in withdrawals. And then he took a breath and he said, if you can be here by 1:00, I will see you and we will work out the payments later.
Yeah.
Okay. So I get to the doctor and my thinking was that I'm just going to get a few pills and then I'm going to keep doing it my way, the Carolyn way. Right. And so I could, just get enough. And I had no intention of going back and paying this guy, yeah, you got suckered.
Yeah.
So that appointment was at 1:00 and then I had to be all the way in Rockville Center, which is like going from Salt Lake to Ogden.
Yeah.
By train. And I made it to this appointment and standing in the doorway waiting for me was this wonderful, wonderful man by the name of Tom Landers. And on my second birthday, he gave me a coin. It's funny because in New York, you get coins. In LA, they give cakes. I don't know how. I
knew you were. I was just going to say, I know Rockville Center very well.
Okay. So, yeah. So anyway,
yeah.
And we're sitting there and, he was everything that that I know that I am now to newcomers, where you're smiling and hi and welcome and, light and sunshine and rainbows come out of our ass, that thing. And I'm sitting there on the couch and he's just looking at me just in his chair, just smiling at me. And I'm like, how aren't you supposed to say something? Very angry. He's like, well, now that you've got your body in check, what do you think you're going to do about your head? I'm like, well, I guess I'll come and see you for a little while. And he's like, well, is it pretty safe to say that you've got a problem with drugs? And I had no intention of saying this. So it just shows you how everything just came together. It was as if Jim Henson put his hand up my ass and started manipulating my lips. And I said for the first time, oh yeah, I can't stop if I wanted to. I don't know how to do this. And he sat back in his chair and he looked at me and he smiled and he said, you just took the first step. And I'm like, oh, I don't want to hear about this AA. He said, have you ever thought about going to AA? And I'm like, no, I never thought about it because it's a cult, right? And I don't want to have anything to do with God. Don't talk to me about God. It's a religious thing. Some imaginary man in the sky who never did me any fucking favors. He took my mother, right? He put me with these people who raised me to be like this, disease, trash. And he takes out a schedule and he's like, well, why don't you just go for the fellowship? You'll meet people that are exactly like you. And I'm like, well, there's nobody like me. Huh. And so I sat on it for a week because I'm like, I'm not, fuck you. It's not my thing. And then February 8th of 2008, my sober date is Thursday, the 31st of January, 2008. I have it on my arm so I don't mess it up. But I went to my first meeting, the 8th of February of 2008. It was the Saturday night beginners meeting at St. John's in Huntington. Do you know Huntington?
Yep, I know Huntington. Yep.
Huntington, it's a lot of bars.
Yes. Well, Huntington's one of the worst train stops.
Huntington Station. Yeah.
Huntington Station. That's
drugs. Yeah.
Yeah, it's bad. I know Huntington.
Yeah. So I went to my first meeting. And I'm one of the lucky ones.
Yeah.
They say that relapse is not a part of recovery. It is for some people.
Yeah.
And I have to admit that when we spoke the other day, I used to be one of those people. It's our way or no way. And you can only get sober with, that's not it at all. So I started on my very first meeting, I heard my story. And I remember, I'm talking these nice ladies. And in fact, I had her speak for me at the 6 p.m. women's step meeting in Burbank. If you ever want to go, it's a great, the BBG group. I'm just putting a little plug there for everybody. They're like, well, just raise your hand and you're going to say your name and you're going to say you're an alcoholic. I'm like, well, I'm not going to say I'm an alcoholic because I'm not an alcoholic. My father was an alcoholic, you know. So I raised my hand and I said, my name's Carolyn. I've got 7 days sober. And everybody just clapped for, yay, they're clapping for me. And I'm like, I kind of like this.
Yeah.
You know, and these wonderful women surrounded me and gave me their numbers. And I was on my journey and I fell in love. I got immersed in AA. I loved it. And being the good addict, alcoholic, you know, after my Monday night meeting, because I went every day of the week, every day. And I used to be a big book Nazi. I know that book upside down and sideways, you know. But whenever I would get home from my meetings, I would watch Intervention, right? It's like a busman's holiday. You kind of like live vicariously, you know, through these people that are still using, you know. But I would watch the shows, and at the end of the shows, they would have these commercials for these beautiful resort-like places in Los Angeles. And do you or a loved one have a problem? You know, and I was reading a lot of druggy memoirs. You know, I love to read a good drug memoir. And in one book, this guy got a job babysitting detoxers. And I'm like, I could do that. I could do that. And so I made the decision at this time I had 4 years sober, and I got my first straight gig. I got my first, you know, straight job. I worked at Starbucks. You know, that was it was humiliating to be 41 at the time and to have to put on, you know, to serve coffee, but it taught me how to talk to people again. You know, it's not a coincidence that their motto is to connect. So I was actually connecting with people and talking to people again, because, you know, I only picked up the phone to call the dealer. Right.
Right.
You know, so I had about 4 years. In. I'm like, you know, I miss the warm weather and I missed LA, and I moved to LA and got in with a great bunch of women, you know, at my home group. They took me in right away, and I could not find a job. I couldn't find a job to save my life. And I had sent resumes, you know. I'm like, look, and I told this to my girls, and this isn't, I don't know if it's important, but it's my story anyway. What I bring to the table as far as when I'm working in residential treatment, I don't have any fancy letters after my name. I barely made it through high school. I took a couple of art history or language classes in college, but, you know, you better believe I've got a PhD in addiction studies, pharmacology, sales and distribution, you know, so you're not going to get any judgment from me at all. So this was on a Thursday, because Thursdays have been so magical for me. I got sober on a Thursday. You know, I met the person that I love that I married on Thursday. You know, Thursdays have been very magical for me. So after my meeting, you know, I'm getting scared because the money's starting to run out and I need a job. So I'm sitting there and I'm like trying to give this God thing a go. You know, they say if you don't like the word God, group of drunks, go outdoors, you know, whatever. And I'm sitting there in my Jeep and I'm getting really upset. And then finally, I had it out with God. I'm like, look, motherfucker, I have done what you have asked me. I got sober. I cleaned up my act. I'm trying to make amends to people. I'm trying to do the next right thing. You know, for those of us that are, or those of you that are normies, do you know how tiring and frustrating it is to have to be accountable for each and every goddamn thing that comes out of your mouth every day? What you do, you have to wake up and say, today I'm going to be a good person. Today, I'm not going to steal from anybody. I'm not going to steal from the supermarket. We have to tell ourselves these things. So I said, I did what you asked of me. And if I've got another 30, 40 years on this planet, and you better make it so I don't feel like I want to die every goddamn day, because I wanted to die every fucking day that I was alive. And come to find out, though, now it's just I didn't like the way I was living. I don't want to die now. I'm doing so many wonderful things you can't do when you're dead. But I'm having it out with God. And I could just see him like sitting there looking at me like, all right, you little shithead who I love more than anything in the world. You want purpose? You want life? You want your calling? You know, you're out there crying, why me? You know, why is this world, why is it happening to me? And I liken it to like being on the side of the road with your thumb out, waiting for life to take you away.
Yeah.
When I didn't realize that life was in session and school was in session. And he said, you know what? Go and save some lives. because that's what you're supposed to do now. And that night, Cliffside Malibu called me. And I started my career at Cliffside Malibu. And I've been working in treatment ever since. And I fall in love with the clients. If you were ever a client of mine, I never had kids of my own. I have a stepdaughter with the person I'm married to now, but I never had children of my own. But I consider every client my kid because, you know, you wish them well. You try to raise them right, you know?
Yeah.
And then you let them out, you let them go.
Yeah.
And some of them make it, some of them don't. And in fact, it's really, I hope you're watching. I don't know if she's watching or not, but at a chateau, there was a group that started calling me Mama Sea Turtle. And the reason why that came about.
I love sea turtles.
Oh, they're wonderful. But I made the analogy of that, you know, some of you, and usually for those of you that work in treatment, we already know who's there for the three hots in a cot or whatever to hook up or hopefully we can talk about that. I know I'm like babbling, but they started calling me Mama Sea Turtle because I said some of you are going to get turned around and end up in the weeds. Some of you are going to get eaten by pelicans, but some of you will make it. Some of you will get to the ocean. And like when I see people like Ashley or Jen or Amy, you know, and this is the shit. This is what we do.
Yeah.
The only way we can keep it is to give it away. And that's not like us. Right. You know? So I'm loving my life. God damn it, I turned 50. That is a fucking
It's
miracle.
so amazing. So amazing. 50 and you help so many people. And I mean, there's so many people here who just love you and they just think you're so great. And that's what recovery does for a lot of us. You know, when we can forgive and when we work a program and, you know, we can take ownership for what we've done and, you know, and do that. And then we become likable people, you know, not the ones that you're holding your stuff from. Like we get to, when you know, like we work a program and then we become, you know, the people that we had longed and missed for so long.
Absolutely.
What do you do for fun with your recovery? I mean, tell us like some of the good joys that you have. And there's so many, I'm sure. Like, what are the fun things that you do now it's so hard to even ask that because it's COVID.
Exactly. I'm like, it's been 2020 for what, like the last 15 years.
Yeah, it feels like it.
I don't know.
It feels like it.
But, you know, I discovered that I have a love of reading. I love to read. So I always have my head in a book. You know, other than recovery, another thing that I'm really passionate of is the paranormal.
Yeah.
You know, so like I'm always researching. Of course, it has to be the darker aspect of the paranormal.
Of course.
Whatever. But it turns me on, and I love it. And the wonderful thing is, and it's funny because she's in our bedroom watching now, so you know. But it's wonderful to be with somebody in isolation that I haven't thought of bashing her head against a rock.
Oh,
you know what I mean?
My home is the same. Praise the Lord. You know, whatever we got going on here right now, you know, there was a lot of dysfunction my whole life. And I live in my parents' basement and my kids are, thank God for electronics. My kids don't even fight with each other because they're on their dang electronics, but it works. And our house is the same. It's enjoyable. You know, I feel for anybody who's in a house where it's ugly and chaos and miserable because it's brutal.
I see, you know, you asked me what it was like up here in Bakersfield. When we first moved here, I tried to find a job in recovery. There is not one to be had. There's like maybe 2 state-run facilities, and Bakersfield is Tweakerville.
Yeah.
You know, and that's something that, you know, I have to remind myself because you brought up something, I don't know if it was earlier or the other day, about, you know, those of us with a little bit of time, how soon we forget what it's like.
Yeah.
You know, and I remember panhandling, you know, at gas stations, and you're like, you have to swallow your, and I've had panhandlers come up to me, and I look at them the exact same way they look at me. You know, you look them up and down, and I'm like, Carolyn, what the hell's your problem? I'll give you $5. You know, I know where it's going to go. but go get right on me.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So as far as fun is concerned, I've been eating and watching a lot of television.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. The TV shows, like I've become part of the TV shows. It's terrible.
Is your thing Bravo? So I love IG, like Investigation Discovery.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I've been watching everything. I've been like getting series and binge watching. I've learned I had to stop the TV period because I was like watching series and not leaving my bed or my couch. I mean, in the beginning, but it got a little too much. What
do you find, I have to ask you this because I've noticed that I'm very particular about the way I live, and like I don't like dishes on the counter. Like I have to do the dishes, I have to clean up because I don't want to live like that anymore. Do you find that you like that? Like you sort of go the other way?
No, I'll let the dishes pile up.
Oh,
I
no, that's not me.
I can totally not to an extent. I mean, it's me and my two girls. That's it here, and so they'll have their big breakfast, and then I'll I won't do I'll do their dishes once I'm doing dinner. But during COVID, oh my God, it was like these kids were eating me out of house and home. They were doing the bored teenager eating. It was out of control. But I try to stay organized and without chaos. I mean, my kitchen can be messy, but my closet is color coordinated. Everything's black, everything's white. It's long sleeve, short sleeve. I mean, it's like my closet, for whatever reason, I OCD on my closet and my underwear and bra drawer.
That's impressive. That's pretty impressive.
Oh, dude, it's like it's crazy.
Yeah.
What would you say are some things? I know we're going late on here, but I'm all right with it. But
I could talk forever. So it's up
I
to
me
you.
too. Me too. Forever. What are things that you find to be helpful tools to help people manage through the stressful situations of being in recovery and the pandemic?
I think it's really important, and I'm going to kind of kill maybe three birds with one stone. I'm a very big proponent for stay away from relationships for the first year.
Yeah. I did.
Because that's really what makes or break you. I think it's really important who you have in your life, who you love. The only thing you have to change when you get sober is everything, people, places, and things, right? And I told you this over the phone that I'll see all too often when people leave, a rehab, they bond together and, they think it's love. And no, it's not. It's called trauma bonding. That's what it is. And they try to recreate the environment. And then one by one, they start plopping away. And, I'm going to be honest with you. I do not work a perfect program. I know that there are Zoom meetings and you got to kind of force me to go because, every now and then you get bored. Like, I don't want to do it. Why do I have to keep doing this? Well, I've got, friends that have got 40 years sober, that people that knew Bill Wilson, and they're still making their meetings. But, I just think it's a great stress reliever is just your environment. I really think that's important. That'll make or break you. Hit your whatever you're doing, whether it's smart recovery, celebrate recovery. Refuge is a really big one. We did that. I don't know.
They have a couple of them here, but I went and I was the only person that ever showed up. So
really?
Unfortunately, but I went to California in my first 2 years, and so we went to the refugee recoveries out in Santa Monica, which was fun.
Yeah, against the stream.
Against
the stream. Well, I believe they're no longer. I don't know if you heard what happened, but they're kind of no longer. But there's they do refuge recovery in the homes. At Chateau, I picked up for the first time an ACOA book, Adult Children of Alcoholics.
Yeah.
That blew my mind. I'm like, oh my God, they're like, read the laundry list. I'm like, like this, I'm afraid of authority.
I should read that.
I mean, it does, you don't have to have an alcoholic in your life. It's just everyone could use a program.
Yeah. Well, no, and that's how I feel. Like just pick something. It doesn't matter what it is. or what, but we've got to figure out something because we have to get that inner healing from somewhere, and we've got to,
Absolutely.
there's
I worked
stuff inside.
I worked at a I don't want to get sued, so we'll just call it Massages Malibu. Okay. And they're really big. They were vehemently anti 12-step. It was just therapy. And I'm like, so what are you sending these people home with?
Yeah.
The need to have to keep coming back.
Yeah. Well, that's what it is. That's what our group is. So, I mean, we've kind of thrived and made that our purpose, was to give people the option. So when they get out, because if you're not doing, like, if you do a fellowship, in the 12-step, that's great.
Right.
If you don't, and if you can't find home there, people have to find somewhere else, because we don't, though it's very rare and few that are reaching 5 and 10 years who are white knuckling it their whole entire recovery and just never, I mean, it's like the guy who can drink but not shoot up,
Exactly.
it happens,
Mm-hmm.
not a lot, but it happens, so. Well, this was a lot of fun. I'm going to jump off here just because I have to put my kids to bed at 9. And she was already keeps walking around like they're testing me.
I'm hungry. I'm
going to stay on so they can stay up on their electronics. I already know how these little kids work. This was so great. I'm so grateful that you came on tonight. And thank you for, being vulnerable and really sharing the depths of your story. We'll have you back on again just to talk more, because one, you're loved. 2, I just know that I'm going to learn a lot from you. And I think a lot of us can learn from you. So I appreciate you taking your time on your Monday night and coming and hanging out with us.
Well, I absolutely appreciate it. I was always taught that it's an honor and a privilege to share. And I was also taught that you are not allowed to say no.
Yeah. Oh, well, that's good to know. And I'm going to start asking a lot more people. When I hang this up, it's going to still stay on, so you and I will talk, but let me end the broadcast here.
Okay.
Thank you guys for coming and watching.